Black is back.
Black is back.
Black is back.
Black is back. Black is back.
Black is back.
Black is
Black is
back.
back.
Black is back.
Black is back.
Black is back. And the rallying call is Black is back. And all of those people who wanted to be mobilized and do.
The document that I will be passing out, it is called Seize the Time. It's a document that I put together for N'Cobra around HR 40. It's a primer on the new HR 40. It was inspired by the work that I'm doing with N'Cobra, the work that I've been doing with the National African American Reparations Commission, and the work that I've been doing with the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations as the Reparations Working Group. Many people think that because Congressman John Conyers, who's been the champion of reparations, the only legislator on the federal side of this issue in the last 28 years to put forth any type of legislation for redress for the crimes committed against our ancestors. In the last 28 years, HR 40 has been the only legislation proposed. We had the opportunity, N'Cobra, the National African American Reparations Commission, had the opportunity to speak with Congressman Conyers around the fact that we felt that the old HR 40 as it was written was obsolete. There was so many things that had happened since 1987 when he introduced this legislation up until 2017 or 2014 when we began the conversation around revising HR 40. We stated that we no longer needed to study whether or not there was continued injury, which HR 40 was designed to do, to study whether or not there was harms of present-day Africans from the crimes committed against our ancestors via enslavement, via the Jim Crow segregation, etc. Well, that had already been settled, especially in 2001 at the World Conference Against Racism. The international community declared that those injuries still remain today. Okay, so we're up. So anyway, we are able to get Congressman Conyers to accept our revised HR 40, which is a remedy bill, no longer a study bill. And so we put this primer together to inform the people nationally about what is going on around that particular legislation, that effort around reparations. So my presentation or my input to the Black is Back electoral candidate school is the use of ballot measures for self-determination, for our struggle for self-determination. What I added this year, because I gave this presentation last year, what I added this year was the use of political action committees as well as ballot measures. I took the liberty, like Glenn Ford, to just do a little bit different than what I was asked to do. I think next slide. So using ballot measures, this is like just the outline of what I'll talk about. The question of legitimacy, ballot measures, referendums, and initiatives, starting an initiative for a popular referendum, the process, some of the questions that we can utilize in a self-determination platform, some of the questions we can put on the ballot that pushes forth our self-determination platform. What is a political action committee and what are the keys to effective strategy in ballot initiatives and political action committees, and then a few resources. I think this slide presentation will be given out, so you'll have this. If not, you can contact the Black is Back Coalition, and they probably can send it to you via electronic form. So the question of legitimacy, we began this whole conversation around ballot measures with the question of what is legitimate representation. And we define, or Webster defines legitimate as being exactly what it was purposed for, not spurious or false. In other words, genuine. Something that's genuine. Like a hammer, we know that a hammer's purpose is to drive in a nail. If it doesn't drive in a nail, then it's not a genuine tool. It can be a mallet that's rubber, is shaped like a hammer, but if it doesn't drive in a nail, it's not legitimate. Or it can be a gavel where a judge uses. It's shaped like a hammer, but if it doesn't drive in a nail, it's not a legitimate hammer. And so when it comes to our representation in a democracy, the purpose, the genuine, legitimate purpose of a representative in a democracy or in a republic, in a democracy, it is eligible voters exercise their political will. They govern through the representatives they elect. So it is the job of a legitimate representative to exercise the will of the people, to govern. The people are governing through their representative. And in a republic, power is held by the people who elect officers or representatives responsible to them. So in a legitimate republic, which America is a republic, power is held by the people. But when we look at those people who are representing us, they do not govern according to our will, nor are they exercising our power. So we have an illegitimate relationship. They have an illegitimate relationship with the people. And in this country, one of the most famous notions around illegitimate representation was the so-called the Tea Party, not the Tea Party, but the Boston Tea, whatever it is, Boston Tea Party, yeah, where they was elected to revolt against the British government, saying that they were being taxed without representation. So they felt that the lords back in England were not legitimately representing them. And so that was our first question about illegitimate representation. In what we're defining as legitimate African representation is direct, complete, unwavering, and honest representation of our people's interests, being totally responsible to them, utilizing the African principle, the greatest good for the greatest number of African people. So when we look at the whole notion of legitimate representation, that's what we're talking about. So, we're good. So we've been talking a lot about colonialism and neocolonialism, and I know this is really a politically astute crowd, but there might be a few people who are not aware of exactly what colonialism is or neocolonialism is. Well, colonialism began as a social construct with Christopher Columbus. One of his names was Cristobal Colon, and that's the root word for colonialism. So you have a colony. Cristobal Colon set up a colony. This whole international, at that time, new structure of social domination, social hegemony. And what he did was they went into a particular area, a foreign area, and they rearranged all of the economic factors, all of the political factors, all of the social institutions that was there in a way that benefited the foreign entity back someplace else. So in Africa, or even in America, the economic forces is land, labor, ingenuity, right? So they took the land of the indigenous or the African people and began to structure that for their benefit. And the labor in Africa, the labor was divided in a whole lot of different ways. They had education, they had mining, they had craftsmanship. They have all these different ways in which the labor in Africa was organized for the purpose of African people. When the colonizer came, they rearranged all of the labor issues for the purpose of benefiting the foreign government. So you had kings and princes that were enslaved or that were put into servitude. You had griots, you had miners, you had artisans, you had skilled craftsmen now that were engaged in slavery or engaged in some type of other economic exploitative practices for the purpose of the European foreign power. And so that was colonialism. And so we can say today that colonialism still exists because the labor in our community is not structured to benefit African people. As someone stated yesterday, even I think the chairman stated that in the Bahamas, they're educated to serve. They're not educated for the purpose of promoting the self-determination aspirations of the people. And so we can say we still live in a colonialized reality today because our institutions, our school systems, our hospitals, we lack hospitals, but the institutions that are supposed to serve the people are not organized for our benefit, but they're organized for the enslaver, for the colonizer. When they say that by the third grade reading scores, they determine how many prisons they're going to build, that says that the institutions of the educational institutions in our community are purposely designed to benefit the colonizer. So it's the same situation. We still live under a form of domestic colonialism in this country. And we have political representatives who are not addressing the governing aspects of our community from this perspective. So they're illegitimate. As a whole class, they're illegitimate. So then we have neocolonialism. Neocolonialism is simply removing direct rule of the enslaver or the colonizer and putting a black face in that particular position. But the structures, the underlying structures, the political structures, the economic structures, the institutional structures still remain in the hands of the exploiter. And we have so our current reality in America, political reality in America is still both colonial domination and neocolonial hegemony. Yes. Next slide. So this black leadership or non-black leadership is an illegitimate representation. And how can we say they're illegitimate? One is they do not address the whole notion of colonialism or imperialism or neocolonialism, because they are the neocolonial subjects. They are the neocolonial players in the system. So they're not even addressing the true political state of our community. Many of them lack the competence. And competence is skill and knowledge. A combination of skill and knowledge is what gives you competence. So they lack the competence to legislate like a Charles and Inez Barron. They don't know how to bring in the resources in our community to change the situations of this hegemony. As they stated, Charles and Inez stated that they changed the whole governing structure in East New York. Not just the councilman, but all these other underlying governing processes within that community. They changed it all around in favor of the people and not in favor of the system. So they lack the skills. This so-called leadership, and I was proposed that we no longer call the people who are supposed to represent us as leaders. Yes. We call them representatives. That's what they are. And right now, they're an illegitimate form of representation. Yeah. So we no longer call them political leaders, because the leader is supposed to take the vision of the people and then put some type of program around realizing the people's vision. And they don't have no connection to the people. None. So we cannot call them political leaders. We can at best call them representatives that have a relationship to white power and not a relationship to African power. Another way that they're illegitimate is that this whole notion of colorblind, the brother talked about these code words yesterday. This notion of colorblind, the Constitution is colorblind. You can't use race as a factor when crafting legislation. This is what they say, right? And any person who say, I want to craft something for black people, they immediately say, no, you can't do that because that's race-based, and you can't do it. And so they cripple our leadership in a way that some of them may want to do something on behalf of African people, but again, they lack the knowledge, and they're crippled by some of these restrictions that this particular government places in their way. So they use words like other or minority or people of color or black and brown in ways to try to get things done. And there's all type of science that says when you craft neutral legislation to handle a situation, the neutral legislation is going to benefit those in less in need more than those who are in need. So the gap gets wider with neutral legislation. Am I right, Congressman, Assemblyman? And so we have to say that neutral legislation is anti-African. In its origin, it's anti-African. We need targeted, specific legislation to our particular people. And that's what we have to have courageous representatives that we put in place who can craft that type of legislation. Also, they're illegitimate because they're dictated to by the Democratic Party. We live under a democratic dictatorship, plain and simple. Whatever the Democratic Party say, that's what's done. In Chicago, we see this dictatorship glaringly clear like no other place in America. And I'll talk about that. I'm going to bring it up a little bit now. There is a community called Inglewood. I grew up in Inglewood. At one time, Inglewood was, a solid, strong, vibrant, working class black community. You see black men when I was growing up, you see black men with their brown paper bags every morning getting on the bus, every evening getting off the bus. I would wait for my father because we lived right at a bus stop, so I would wait every day for my father to get off with his brown paper bag. There were 93,000 residents in Inglewood when I was living there as a young man. There's 33,000 today. The rest is vacant lots, similar to what you see here, right? This is Chicago. There are 5 aldermen, councilmen in New York, who have a piece of Inglewood. These 5 Negroes and Negresses could not save 5 high schools because the mayor wanted to close 5 high schools in this community. 5. And the community came out and the community spoke. We cannot let this happen because we know that there's a lot of gang issues in Chicago. So if you send these kids over there, they got to pass 5 or 6 gang territories before they get to school. So if you close these schools, what you're automatically saying, all these children are going to drop out. Plain and simple. Community came out and said, okay, we can't close all these schools until we build a school. We're going to maybe close one and we're going to close them in over periods and intervals. The next 2 weeks after the sister made the statement, the school board voted to close them all. You have 5 aldermen in one area, and they can't legislate on behalf of the people in regards to the school system, which is going to cripple this community even more. So, in fact, what we have is the mayor said, this is what we're going to do, and this is what we're going to do. What the hell what do people say? That's dictatorship. And because we're married to the Democratic Party, we are absolutely being dictated to on a regular basis, even on the federal level. When we were pushing H.R. 40, at the time Barack Obama was elected, Barack Obama was a Democrat. The Democrats had control of the House. The Democrats had control of the Senate. And Congressman Conyers says, we're going to push this legislation now. I'm the chair of the Judicial Committee. We're going to push this legislation. I'm ready. He called N'Cobra up to Detroit, to his home state, and we laid out a platform and a strategy. 3 months later, we couldn't get him on the phone. Because Nancy Pelosi, who's head of the Democrat, who was the Speaker of the House at that time, says, no, don't bring anything like this. You're not going to bring it. We're just going to push this health care bill, and we don't want to hear nothing from the Congressional Black Caucus. Nothing. None of them. Maxine Waters says the Barack Obama presidency neutered the Black Caucus. That's democratic dictatorship. So when we talk about being technical or nominal Democrats, we really mean technical or nominal Democrats. Not if you utilize it, be clear that this is simply a strategy to get in office or get on the ballot. But you have no allegiance to this party at all.
That's right.
The final reason we call these people illegitimate because they do not desire power. They're not running on the platform of building power for the people. They run on a platform of influence. And I'm going to say, and it's a delusional platform that we can influence these people. It is straight up delusional if you understand power. Next slide. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about power to show that this whole particular strategy of these current elected officials is delusional and ain't going to never work. There's 2 types of power according to Dr. Amos Wilson. And I know Charles Barron uses this, and Inez Barron uses this. Blueprint for Black Power. He says there's 2 types of power. There's a power to do what you want to do. That's called self-determination, right? And there's the power over others to get others to do what you want to do, what you want them to do. Right now, we don't have either forms. Organized in a way, we have people mass power, we have people power, but it's not organized. That's our job, to organize it so we can engage in self-determination and stop other people from doing what they want to do over us. There's 4 forms of power. There's force. Force is just that. You have the physical ability to make someone do what you want them to do. Regardless if they want to do it or not, you have the ability to make them do it. The second is coercion. Coercion is when someone thinks you have the force and think you're going to use it. You don't have to use it and you don't have to have it, but if they believe you have it, they're going to do what you want them to do. That's called coercion. Then influence is when someone does what you want them to do because they like you. Do white folks like black folk? They showed us over 500 years they have no affinity for black people. They do what you want to do. You can influence someone if they believe you're the expert. Do white folks think blacks are the experts of anything in this country?
Nothing that they'll give us recognition.
Nothing that they give us. White power, and I'm not speaking just saying white people, but white power. Does white power think that we're the experts at anything in this country? You can also influence someone if they think you are the authority. Like a parent can influence their child. They ain't got to force them or coerce them. You can say, son, daughter, I'm telling you to do this. It's in your best interest to do it. And I'm your father, I'm your mother, and the child would do it. Do white folks think we are the authority in anything in this country? Anything on the planet? But the whole aspect about it, influence, is they have to have some type of positive attitude or relationship to you. They have to like you. And our so-called political representatives are trying to influence white folks and not understand influence. They ain't gonna never get nothing because white power ain't gonna never like African people because their whole existence is bent on the oppressions and suppression and repression of African people. So now they're gonna never do anything from the position of influence. And the last form of power is manipulation. Is when you get someone to do what you want to do and they don't know that you want them to do it. When black in Chicago, we see this manipulation at its heightened level with what is called horizontal violence. When you see these young brothers killing one another, they think this is what they were born to do, be gangsters. This is what they were born to do, sell narcotics, control this territory, etc. But if you craft a community in such a way where you pull out all of the legitimate forms of economic expression, you diseducate them, you remove the fathers, you remove everything that allows them to self-actualize in a positive way, you're going to get exactly what you're getting, and they're going to think they're doing it because they chose to do it. That's manipulation. Yes. Our communities, when you see all these young sisters engaged in dancing on the pole or working in these sex videos, any type of the sex industry, they think they're doing it because they got these beautiful bodies or whatever, that they making this choice. That's manipulation. The black woman's body has always been under attack in this country by white folks. Right. That's manipulation. But we're thinking that we're doing this out of our own will. And so we don't understand power. And so for us to remove this illegitimate representation, we have to form power to do so. We have to be able to force them out, coerce them to do what we want to do, or we manipulate them in such a way that they have no other choice. And there's several bases of power. Property is a base of power. Organization is a base of power, because you have to build power from a base. Networks and ethnic solidarity. Next slide. So ballot measures. Now we're going to talk about ballot measures after we talked about power. Ballot measure builds power based on ethnic solidarity, using force and influence. We force the issue on the ballot through the petition process. Once we get the issue on the ballot, they have nothing to do. They have no other option but to vote on it, because we put it there utilizing their process. So we're forcing this issue before the people. The ballot initiative is a means by which a petition signed by a certain minimum number of people, registered voters, can bring about a public vote on a proposed statute or constitutional amendment. 24 states allow for ballot initiatives, which are a form of direct democracy. Again, America is a representative democracy and a republic. A representative democracy, the people put a representative in place, and the representative act on the power of the people. Direct democracy is when the people vote on every issue. And there's so much happening with the governing of America. People cannot vote on every issue, but in certain cases, the people can vote on a particular issue directly, and the ballot initiative or the referendum is that process. So a particular issue that gets the people's opinion, not through their representative, but through their own particular vote on an issue, is what ballot measures allow. So this is direct democracy. So ballot measures can be direct or indirect initiative. Under direct initiative, a resource or a measure is put directly to vote after being submitted by petition. Under indirect initiative, a measure is first referred to the legislature, and if they're not able to grapple with it, then it's put before a popular vote. when organized initiative process, a vote is known as an initiative, ballot measure, or proposition. So you'll find all three of those terms used. Ballot measures are referendums. Referendums provide the people with the means of expressing their opinion on proposed legislation before it becomes operative as law. So there may be some challenging legislation that some legislators may not want to put out there because they don't know how the people will take it, so they'll propose that it be put in referendum form and see how the people respond. There are two primary forms of referendum, the legislative and the popular. The legislative referendum, again, is put out by the legislature, and the popular referendum is one that the people can put on the ballot as a result of petition drive. There's advisory referendums like Chicago. Initiatives are binding. If they voted on, they're binding. They become law, whatever that outcome is. In Chicago, they don't not allow for binding initiatives or referendums. They have advisory referendums. But what we found out in Chicago doing our research was that 87% of the initiatives that were put on the ballot won. And 93% of those that won were actually made into law. So the odds were in our favor. If we got it on the ballot, we would win. And if we won, it would become law. Historically, over the last 12 years, that's how the process is ran in Chicago. The difference between a referendum allows people to state their opinion on laws that have been enacted by the legislature, and the initiative allows people to propose their own laws and put it directly to the vote of the people. Next slide. What is the process of utilizing a ballot measure? You contact whatever city department, it's the Board of Elections, or a state board or a local board of elections, to find out all the states and local bodies, election bodies have rules, generally 3-4 page document to state the rules on and the process. You file a proposed petition with the designated state official. They will review the proposal, and in several states they'll review the language of the proposal, your actual question. You prepare a title and a summary of your question. And then you petition circulation to obtain the required number of signatures. In Chicago, the number of signatures was determined by how many people voted in the city of Chicago at the last gubernatorial election. And so there were, in the city of Chicago, there were 1,300,000 people who voted in the last general governor's election, and we needed 8% of that number to put our initiative on the ballot. And so we have 104,000. I don't think that's correct, though. I have there. I don't think that math is correct, but I think, that was Cook County, actually. That was Cook County. It was 1.3 million in Cook County. In Chicago, there's about 600,000 voters in the gubernatorial election. Yeah, it says Cook County. And we needed 54,000 signatures to get our petition on the ballot. So there's a general format, a petition sheet, registered voters. It had to be registered voters. The circulators' information had to be put on the ballot. Those who actually got the signatures, and those had to be notarized. Then you submit your signatures to qualify for the ballot. They must be filed timely, and they must meet all the requirements to get your question on the ballot. Next slide. This was 10 things that I found that potential ballot initiatives proponents should ask prior to sponsoring the ballot measure. So if you're going to do this, you want to kind of go through these questions. Does your initiative have voter appeal? Thank you. Does your initiative have voter appeal? Well, our initiative was around reparations. We had a lot of voter appeal. Was it simple and straightforward? Our question was, should corporations have to pay? So it was simple and straightforward. We went into detail a little bit more, and I'll read the detail, but that was really the basic title. Should corporations have to pay for their crimes? And people were able to understand that. Does it have a strategic or tactical value? Yes. Resources to our community. That's very strategic. Next slide. can you attract the necessary resources? We rolled ours out in stages. Our first stage was to get the necessary resources to do our printing, to have a lawyer look over our ballot questions. So we knew that once we got it on the ballot, there was certain resources we had to develop or to gain to get it on the ballot. And then once it got it on the ballot, we knew we was going to have to run it like a political campaign. So we needed more funds after that. So we thought we could get the resources. We certainly got enough resources to get all of our printing done and our to pay for our notary who had to notarize the petitions, and for office type equipment. Is it cost effective? Will it cost relatively little to qualify? This was what our sister Inez talked about a little bit when she talked about how some campaigns, they pay for signatures, $1 or so for a signature. We needed 54,000 signatures. We couldn't afford to pay $54,000 to get these signatures. And as you stated, we was trying to get, we knew we'd need twice as many, to qualify. So it was not really a cost-effective situation that we went into. However, with the finances, we thought, and we still believe today, even though we didn't reach our numbers, that cost was really not the determining factor why we didn't reach our numbers. Is the political climate right? Well, we thought, yes, the political climate is right, as everybody here stated. The political climate is right for self-determination. Yes, right. No question about it. Our people are looking at the idea that we should control our communities in every aspect. So the political climate is definitely right. Next slide. Will the ballot language be in your favor? Well, we had opportunity in Chicago to craft our own language, so definitely it was in our favor. Does it help or hurt other candidates? It would probably hurt the petty bourgeoisie, but, because they could actually enact this legislation in their own without us having to go through this measure. So it definitely was going to put a negative light on them. Does it help or hurt other ballot initiatives? We felt that none of the other initiatives spoke to African people, so that was not a question. And are we prepared to win? We are definitely prepared to win because we knew that we would then direct the resources to some of the reparative aspects we need in our community. Next slide. We can skip this slide. You can have that. There was a study done that shows that this country is in favor of ballot measures because they're frustrated with the government. Some of the key findings in this study was that voters in important demographic groups are enthusiastic about ballot measures. Voters are in these demographics see ballot measures as direct, tangible opportunities to affect change in their state and their community and in their own lives. And there's some other aspects of this study that shows that the people are ready to take this form of political action if it's presented in the right way. Next slide. These are some of the questions that you can put on a ballot initiative. This is the one that we actually use for reparations. Point number 6 in the National Black Agenda for Self-Determination is reparations. And so our title was, as I stated, should corporations be required to pay for their crimes? And the basic question was, many scholarly studies and human rights findings assert that African Americans are still socially, economically, and psychologically hampered by the institutions of enslavement and discrimination. Should the current slavery disclosure ordinance, which is in Chicago, be amended to mandate the corporations institution, in addition to disclosing their investments and profits from enslavement, must also enter into the economic enhancement agreements with the African descendant population in the city? And so in most cities, they have what is called community benefit agreements. When corporations want to engage in some type of action in the community, they have to sign a community benefit agreement with the community groups. Well, we threw that out, and we were introducing the whole idea of an economic enhancement package as opposed to a community benefits agreement. And so they didn't have to know what that was. And when we were asking about signing them, the basic question is, should corporations have to pay for their crimes? And the people understood that. And we were able to engage them. One on black women, point number 1, as the chairman stated in our 19-point agenda for self-determination, is the black woman. And a particular question that we can ask, should natural contraceptives be offered at clinics in the city? We know that this Depo-Provera it has all these severely harmful and generationally harmful effects on black women, but they're not offered anything other than that when they go to these clinics. And so the question is, should clinics be required to share natural options of birth control to women once they come in for contraceptives? So these are ways we can be creative and craft questions specifically designed to our 19-point agenda for self-determination. Next slide. This is a couple of more. Black community control of the police is number 3 on our platform. Should the city police department be accountable to community residents? Council authority. That's straight, simple, straightforward. And that could be the title, and then the title can be shortened, and then you can put a question underneath it. Next slide. Free all political prisoners. That's also question number, platform number 4 on our total platform. Should all black prisoners be held in state prison systems fought to end illegal discrimination in the 1960s, 70s, 80s be put on a fast track to freedom? Simple question. Should they be put on a fast track to freedom? You know, if you can build a campaign around that, you know, certainly there are instances where we can move that forward. Next slide. Political action committees. This is a little bit new that I'm adding to our conversation, and it speaks to the whole issue of scalability and capacity. It's one means by which we engage confrontation with the petty bourgeoisie, with this illegal representation. They're not going to leave without a confrontation. And we're going to be the ones that have to confront them. Let's just get that clear in our heads that they're going to have to be confronted. And so this is one way in which we can engage in confrontation. When I was growing up in the 60s, 70s, after the riots in Chicago and elsewhere, there was this urban renewal project going across the country. You remember that, Glenn? Urban renewal. Well, we need an urban removal project, an urban replacement project, right? We got to replace these illegitimate Negroes, petty bourgeoisie that's running our people to Iowa and to Nebraska and to Kentucky, you know, and allowing our people to be go through a whole nother system of trauma once they get there, being surrounded by all this whiteness and powerlessness in those communities. So we need an urban removal project. So what is a PAC? It's a special organization set up for collecting contributions from a large number of people, aggregating them, and then making contributions to campaigns and organizations. It's generally based on special interests or party interests. There's 2 forms: connected. Those are connected to a party or candidate, or non-connected, that are not connected to a party, candidate, union, or labor or company. The main types of non-connected is federal and non-federal. If it's federal, that means you can only contribute to a federal candidate. If it's non-federal, you can contribute to local and state candidates. The requirements must be met, as Councilwoman Inez Barron stated, that, you know, we have to be clear that we are doing everything according to the letter when we engage in this political process. Registration is needed, strict accounting and reporting process. The reporting process is who's donating what and how much, and who's receiving what and how much. And that has to be meticulously recorded and be able to be shared to a number of stakeholders. Thank you, sister. Next. So what's the process and the pros and cons of creating a PAC? This process is very simple. You come up with a purpose, you name your PAC, you register it, whether it's federal, non-federal, it's going to definitely be non-connected. You keep accurate records, and you raise and contribute money. That's pretty simple, you know, a process. The pros is you get to set the scope. Our scope is self-determination, black power, right? It's long-lasting. It can involve many people. You can take upon the big issues, as I stated, and you get to sit at the table at every major decision that's made by legislators. The cons is there's a lot of rules that you have to follow. It requires hard work. You must raise lots of money. Easy to burn out. These are some of the things I found, because it's ongoing. You never stop. So you have to be bringing in new blood, and it's difficult to stay relevant. Well, we don't have a problem with staying relevant. because power is something that is always relevant, and the lack of it, and what happens to people when they don't have it in any sufficient quantities, and so we don't have a problem with staying relevant. Next slide. The brigade. I heard Brother Tashara use the word brigade several times yesterday in referring to the process of getting the Hoover House built here in Chicago, in St. Louis. That there was a brigade, there was some forces that were put together, and this was what they were designed. This was their purpose, is to erect a physical space for African people to wage a self-determination battle, not only in the city of St. Louis, but out of here, a national battle, as you see by the attendance here today. So the purpose of the Brigade PAC is to fight white supremacy, build power, and legislate for self-determination. That's pretty clear. There hasn't been a fight against white power, white supremacy in Chicago since Harold Washington. Brother Kabula raised Harold Washington's name up yesterday. And there has not been a serious fight against white power in the political process since that particular time. All struggles in the city of Chicago by black politicians has been around influence, which we already determined that's delusional. You're not going to get power trying to base our efforts on trying to influence white power to rule in our favor. So we have this name we're throwing out there, the People of African Descent Self-Determination Brigade Political Action Committee, also known as the Brigade. Specifically, it's designed to run a group of candidates and remove all the illegitimate representation in our communities for the purpose of building power bases to effectively neutralize the policies of white supremacy and enact legislation in support of the 19-point National Black Self-Determination Agenda. So utilizing the PAC allows us to build power based on property, organization, and ethnic solidarity. Again, those are the bases in which you build power, whereby we can utilize every aspect of power. We can force things down the throats of white power. We can coerce them. Once we build get enough candidates in, we can coerce these other petty bourgeoisies to act as if they were part of the brigade, to keep from being supplanted or removed by the brigade. So we can also use coercion. And we're going to definitely have to try to influence our people. Let them see, as our sister Keeley did, that we have their best interests. We are the authorities when it comes to building power and self-determination in our community. And that's simply a definition of the brigade. And I already talked about the schools in Inglewood. So we have this large community in Inglewood where 5 aldermen have a piece of this community. We want to try to build a PAC to go up against all 5 of them, right? So next slide. So in Chicago, in Illinois, PACs can contribute $55,000 to a local candidate, $10,000 from an individual, $20,000 from a corporation or labor union. To win an automatic election in Chicago, the average cost is about $35,000. And it garners less than 6,000 votes. The last elections, there's no automatic candidate got more than 6,000 votes and won. We want to try to build a brigade of $200,000, a fund of $200,000, utilizing the black business community in Chicago. Cook County, and with Chicago rests, is the largest black business base in the country, as far as any county. Now, New York has 5 counties, or 5 boroughs, but as a one county, Cook County is the largest black business base in the country. We have utilized this method of going to the black business community in the past to fund certain issues, Amos Wilson Institute. We have utilized this process. And we have tons of young millennial black business owners that we can go, all we want is $200 over a 2-month period to fund this brigade to replace these illegitimate representatives that we have in our community. And so we know how to get the money is there for us to build this brigade. And where it takes $35,000 to run a campaign, because we're running under an idea and not a particular candidate, we're running under fighting against white supremacy, which none of these Negroes, all of these Negroes who are in office have an 85% or better voting record with white supremacy. That they have not challenged the mayor. 85 to 90% voting record with white supremacy. So it's clear we can run a campaign against fighting white supremacy. A whole idea of how do we fight white supremacy, and we're going to put these particular candidates who have a relationship to the people, their sole purpose is to fight white supremacy. And so it won't be like they have 35,000, but each one of them would have access to $200,000, right? Because we're running the idea, not the particular candidate. But we have candidates who can stand the muster up against whatever type of scrutiny there is, that they're clean, that they have the right political line. And so that's something that we can do in other places as well. Next slide. So the keys to effective strategy, we must attack the legitimacy of the representation in our community. We cannot call them political leaders. They're illegitimate for the reasons that we stated. They're not wielding the power of the people, and they're definitely not governing according to the will of the people. We must educate clearly that initiatives and referendums empowers the people, and that empowerment means self-determination. Empowerment does not mean social justice, because we live under social justice. When black folks are murdered by the police, that's social justice. For a white community who has an unfavorable position against African people, that's their justice for us. So when you're out there fighting for social justice, you're getting social justice every day. Their social justice, not ours. We have to be clear, we're fighting for power. Forget this whole notion of social justice. Our goal is power.
That's right.
Must honestly address the questions, those 10 questions around referendums and initiatives. Must understand completely the process of the certification. Again, all these rules that you must follow them correctly. Must control the framing of the issue. Again, we're fighting against white supremacy and for power and self-determination. That is our push. Must clearly educate that the brigade or any PAC is a structural means to replace illegitimate representation. We have to have a structure to replace them. Thank you, Cecilia. We have to have a structure. We can't say we want them gone or run individual. Yeah, we want to run individual candidates, but we also want to run teams against these people. Have them fighting just more than just one. And if we win one seat, and we're going out to 5 and we win one seat, we won. And even less we say that we don't win none, we still win. Because we've empowered the people with the understanding of what real power is, and that this representation is straight up illegitimate, and they have no authority in our communities, and we're going to replace them one way or the other. We might have to go McIndow way and put some herbs in there, some poisonous herbs in this soup. By way of McIndow, but before we get to McIndow's methodology, let's try this methodology. So it is a structural means by which we can replace this illegitimate leadership, not air and put leadership, but representation. We must build an economic base to run a successful urban removal replacement campaign. It all builds upon the economic base that we're able to, how much money we're able to put together effectively and utilize it strategically and effectively. Must have candidates that have a connection to the community, desire to build power, a commitment to fight against white supremacy, and uphold the 19-point self-determination agenda as their platform. So that's how that's one means in which we vet the particular candidates, but we're going to have to get deeper than that. But that's on the surface, that they have to have a desire to build power and not this whole social justice piece. And put together an experienced campaign and election team. And we have here at the school the type of experience that we need to run any successful campaign anywhere in the country. Black power, black is back. Reparations now.
Black is back.
Black is back.
Black is back.
Black is back. Black is back.
Black is back.
Black is
Black is
back.
back.
Black is back.
Black is back.
Black is back. And the rallying call is Black is back. And all of those people who wanted to be mobilized and do work